Well, it's Tuesday night. It's 6 o'clock. It must be time for all things Brunswick, everybody. Welcome back. A week has passed, and believe it or not, we got a lot to talk about. We have a great guest here. I'm Bill Moore.
Mary Stillwell.
And Dan Roman.
Mary, you want to introduce our guest?
I would be happy to. It is with pleasure that I introduce to you Randy Pelton, who is a member of the board at the Board of Elections. Welcome, Randy.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
If you could please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I'm originally from New Jersey, so like a lot of folks, I'm here by choice, not by birth.
Right.
And I worked for 42 years in the telecommunications and IT industry. And during that time, I held a number of positions, including at one stint, I was a nationally certified information systems auditor. So information systems and elections is nothing more than a huge information system.
Sure.
That maintaining that, the integrity of that system and the validity of the vote is very important to me from a personal and a professional background.
Mm-hmm.
I first became involved in elections in 2002 when my wife and I moved to Florida to do parental caregiving for my parents and looking for something to do. And when we went to vote, register to vote, I foolishly said, well, how can I be a poll worker? I volunteered. And they said, well, you do get paid for that. Well, what I didn't realize, it was probably less than minimum wage by the time you put in the hours. So I worked my first elections in Florida in 2002, worked the office in the presidential election in 2004. And then when we moved to Brunswick County, I volunteered to work elections here. Between 2006 and 2013, I did virtually every job there was to do as a poll worker and some other jobs. Was nominated in 2013 to be a member of the board, and I'm finishing up my 10th year as a member.
That's great.
So,
That's
With every
great.
indication of returning again.
Yes, we hope.
Thank you.
I think we've asked Randy to come today. We have had a little bit of controversial discussion on an award that was given to the staff of the Board of Elections for their exceptional work. And a lot of people are not understanding that award. And I have asked Randy to join us today and to explain this to the audience and to let us know exactly what it entails.
Okay. There is an organization which is known as the Election Excellence Center, and colloquially they're called the Alliance. They have recognized 10 counties across the country as having been superior performance and standards on elections. In North Carolina, there were actually 2, Forsyth County, which is Greensboro, and Brunswick County.
Great. So this is a national thing.
Nationally, yes, it's 1 out of 10.
Okay.
So, as a result of that, our staff has been asked to attend an initial meeting in Chicago, which they did, to discuss with other staffs from around the country items of interest to each one of those organizations from an elections perspective on the administrative side. The balloting side of the elections process is controlled by North Carolina statute,
Right.
and rulings from the courts and the State Board of Elections for North Carolina as they apply the statutes and the court rulings and the rules that they send out to the individual 100 counties in North Carolina. That is tightly controlled by the state and by the law, and we strive very, very hard to manage that process to the point where in 2022, we had, now just blew out of my head, 72,416 voters registered to vote in that election, and we had the exact same number of ballots were
Right.
cast. There have been allegations unfounded from 2020, because there's still some folks fighting that election, that there were votes changed between Brunswick County and the time it went to the state. We have demonstrated conclusively numerous times that, in fact, every vote that was cast in Brunswick County for every candidate was exactly what was reported to the state and what the state published. So having that number as accurate as we possibly can be is critical to having the public have faith in our system
Right.
and faith in the folks that are conducting the elections within Brunswick County. On the administrative side, the board has a fiduciary responsibility, and I use that term because that's what's in the law, to manage the public treasury wisely. And if we have an opportunity to allow our staff to gain knowledge, background, and leverage the experience of other governmental elections bureaus,
Right.
then that can only benefit us as a
Yes.
board, as an office, and benefit the taxpayers of Brunswick County, because the taxpayers of Brunswick County are the one carrying the load for all the elections.
That's right.
And we're looking at this as an opportunity to help our staff work smarter, work better, work more effectively.
Right.
At the moment, at the end of January, and I don't have the end of February numbers, we had just under 125,000 registered voters in Brunswick
Wow.
County. We are growing net gain about 600 to 750 a month.
Wow.
There are some months when that number is bigger. We are looking at, by the time we get to November of 2024, we will probably have somewhere between 137 and 140,000 registered voters in
Wow.
Brunswick County.
Incredible.
You know, how do we manage that growth?
Mhm.
How do we manage that growth in minimize the impact of the cost of doing that?
Mhm.
What a lot of folks don't understand and don't realize is that probably in 2024, the cost of that presidential election to the taxpayers of Brunswick County will fall somewhere between $600,000 and $1 million. Wow. You know, how do we manage to control that cost?
Yeah.
And that's why the board looked favorably on the ability of our folks to interact with other
Yes.
elections bureaus from around this country and try to gain some insight and knowledge into best practices, what other people are doing. How do you manage your staff? Because we are going to have somewhere between 400 and 450 people working on the 2024 election. How do you recruit them? How do we train them? How do we monitor them? Do all the administrative things that have to be done to have a successful election before you even count vote one. So
that's right. How many did you have in the last election?
I think it was 425 people working.
Okay. And how much had that increased in, say, 5 years?
I can't give you an exact number on that. I can tell you that just to give you an indication of how things have changed in 2016, and I'm doing these numbers off the top of my head.
Sure.
We had about 2,700 applications for paper ballots, mail-in paper ballots. And we got back about 2,400. In 2020, partially because of COVID, partially because there was a stress by one of the major parties on mail-in balloting, that number went to about 27,000 applications.
Wow.
We mailed out about 24,000 ballots, received back about 19,000 ballots. So we went from 2,400 received back in 2016 to 19,000. In 2020, we had 9 people working full-time just managing mail-in paper ballots in the office.
Wow.
So
That was going to be a question I was just about to ask. Was going to my mind. What is the additional cost of all that?
well, these are folks who come in as temporary employees of the county.
Mhm.
I cannot tell you what they were being paid. I don't have that information, but obviously when you have that number of folks working literally full time, it becomes an expense.
Plus, you got the mailing expenses too, right?
Oh yeah,
To mail them out, get them back,
Absolutely.
and all that. So,
you know,
and again, I'm not knocking mail-in balloting. I'm just questioning
No.
the cost to it.
there's a cost to everything, and
Obviously, yeah.
obviously, we're looking at substantial numbers. It's incumbent upon us as board members to say, and taxpayers ourselves, how do we manage this? How do we get the best possible outcome
Mhm.
for the voters and the taxpayers of Brunswick County at a reasonable cost? So
Right.
that's where we're headed, and I'm
Incredible, isn't it?
Thank you. It's my turn.
Yeah.
About me, I'm sorry. I apologize. I thought about that. Question a little bit different direction. We're going to jump another 10,000 people in round numbers, maybe a little bit more by the time we vote in 2024. That's what's
yes.
projected. Who determines the size of precincts? And with that, if you needed to add one, how does that happen? Because I don't know that, and I don't think our people know that either.
Yeah, obvious. Right now we have 27 precincts in Brunswick County.
Correct.
The state has various guidelines on the number of people you should have in each precinct. One of the biggest problems that we have as a board and as a staff, and as we sit here today, earlier today, our director was actually out in Southport looking at new facilities where we could vote down there. Finding physical locations to vote is one of the biggest problems,
Yep.
biggest challenges we have. Not only early voting, which is essentially when you look at it, if you have a location where you're going to do early voting, it's a 3-week commitment to that facility. Up in the northern part of the county, we utilize the Leland Cultural Arts Center. We have used that facility for several years. The folks in Leland and the town of Leland who own that facility have been great to let us use that. And that facility is 3 weeks in the process. By the time you move your equipment in, start voting, go through that, and then it also is a regular polling place on election day. Right now we have 27 precincts in the county. Some of them run from 2,000 or 3,000 people up to 4,000, 5,000, 6,000. The state would look at it and tell us that's too many people. We look at it and say we have no other physical place to go to be able to split it.
Mhm.
One of the things that our board has been looking at for some period of time is the concept of what they call voting centers. It's been implemented in a number of states, specifically Indiana has had great success with this. And in its simplest terms, you take the early voting concept where you can go to any one of the early voting concepts, regardless of what precinct you live in, and vote early. We just take that concept and move it to election day. And instead of having 27 polling places open on election day, because they are precinct specific,
Right.
we might have 10 or 12 or 15, and you can go to any one of those in the county and be able to vote. All right.
Hmm.
So that's a concept that we were working on. That's going to require legislative action,
Yes.
approval by the legislature, approval by the governor, obviously, because he would have to sign off on it. But this is something that our board has been looking at for a while as a potential for managing the growth within the county and managing precinct size. We have the technology that would allow us to put in the security to be able to do that. So somebody couldn't go from location A to location B to location C. The registration system during early voting is updated every 20 minutes to half hour. So if you go into location A, if you go to Leland Cultural Arts Center and voted, and then you said, well, I'm going to get in the car and I'm going to run down to Charlotte and vote again. By the time you got there, the folks in Charlotte would know that you've already voted up there. Then, that's a critical piece to being able to manage that.
Yes.
So to answer your question originally, it's the state that gives us guidelines on the number of precincts and the number of folks in the precinct. We have to manage that to the reality. Do we have some place to vote? We look at someplace like Brunswick Forest. Brunswick Forest is a residential community in Leland, projected to be about 10,000 living units, which would probably generate us 20 to 22,000 voters, and one physical location in Brunswick Forest where we could possibly put a polling place. And so we would have a precinct of Brunswick Forest with 20,000 people in it. The state says you need 2 to 4,000 in each precinct. Where do we put those folks to vote? I can't put it in somebody's garage and say, well,
Right.
John down the street.
You're not using my front and back door. I can just see that coming right now.
Your house is big enough.
Just go out and out the back.
You squint
So-
one A, not the other.
Sure,
So-
thank you.
Mhm.
We welcome any input. Anybody has any great ideas, we're willing to listen. But finding polling places and physical locations and defining precincts is a never-ending job.
Exactly.
What
It's
I never
always been a
understood in
problem.
the South, and thank me for being a Yankee from a New York, Southern New York, though, so that kind of qualifies it. But, in New York, we shut the schools down on election day. Okay.
Right.
And the teachers could have a work day if they need to go in and work in another part of the building. Not a big deal. But for some reason down here, we don't.
Right.
That's correct. We haven't done that in the past. Our director has been working closely with the Board of Education, rather, and we are trying to get the future elections days designated as teacher work days. That's one of the things that we're looking at right now, and whether or not we could get that implemented at a statewide level, is another issue. But
The thing is New York's going away from that because they don't want people going into the schools. So they're migrating away from it.
Mhm.
They're going to same thing you're doing,
Mhm.
separate locations, because they used to always be in the school.
Right.
For the
Right.
first
Yeah.
30 whatever years I voted, you went to your local grade school,
It's a
basically.
little red schoolhouse.
Right. Well, in
Right.
your case, it was a stone tablet. to vote on,
I knew that
Um,
was coming.
but they're moving away from it because they consider it a security risk to the school. even though
Yeah.
the school's closed.
In 2020, they used South Brunswick as our voting place for the municipalities.
Mhm.
And usually we vote at our community center. We have an issue with parking there.
Parking is a major issue.
It is. And so when they had the voting at the high school in 2020, I thought it went very smooth.
Okay.
I mean, there was a lot of parking. People were not lined up. I thought it worked out really well. But then all of a sudden, we're back to the community center.
Well, as I
So-
said, Sarah Levere, who is our director, is actually out
Mhm.
in Southport earlier today, and
That's a
and-
terrible
and-
place.
And looking at potential possibilities out
Mhm.
there with
Yeah.
our fellow who handles the facilities. So
Yeah.
Can I open up a can of worms?
certainly,
Going to anyway.
we going fishing?
Why are you
He's fi-
asking?
he's-
Dan?
he's- He's fishing.
The long-term solution potentially is online voting. what's the realistic aspect of that? I mean, is it viable? The security risk is tremendous, obviously, but it would alleviate a lot of these issues.
Yes, it would alleviate a lot of issues.
And then there's this other can of worms.
And it was
Yeah,
going to
well-
create a whole other bunch
And
of
the
them,
other
right?
one. And the
My
other
can of
one.
worms, as I said earlier, I was an information systems auditor in the IT side. I do not think today the technology exists to be able to securely do that. In my humble
I'm
opinion.
ex-IT too, by the way. So
Okay.
I get
All
what you're
right.
saying. And I
You know-
agree with you, by the way.
So you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
leave now. They're going to talk for a while.
Yeah, I totally
We're
agree with you.
done.
actually. Yeah.
Should we have a snack?
In my personal opinion, I think there are some states that have 100% mail-in balloting.
Mhm.
From my professional experience, I view that as an absolute jeopardy point for security. You don't have control of who's actually casting that ballot. And I'll tell you a quick anecdotal story. I listened to a fellow who was doing talk radio, who originated was in San Diego. He moved from San Diego to Charlotte in 2019. He filed with the California Department of Motor Vehicles. He surrendered his license and gave him his new mailing address. And actually, he was in South Carolina, just over the state line. He related that unsolicited, he got a California 2020 presidential election ballot in the mail to his new address in South Carolina. He said, I didn't vote it because it would have been illegal. But how many of those
Yes.
situations occurred?
Right.
Goodness,
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, to me, mail-in voting is an extreme risk.
It is.
And online voting essentially has very similar risks. You don't know who's voting. You could look at potential, specific codes for people down the road, but the technology's not there right now.
Not yet.
It's not even close, I don't think, but it is something I think that needs
and
to
no
be
offense,
explored.
gentlemen, but if they can break into DOD
Yes.
with firewall after firewall after firewall after firewall, I'm
Nothing is
sorry,
safe.
nothing is safe.
But
That's
you could
right.
Well-
you could make the same argument for a lot of things, even the way paper. There's ways around that too.
Just-
However, I will tell you, and that's something we need to, before we finish today, I want you, for our viewers and listeners, to walk through the process of voting to show how secure it is from the time they vote
Yes.
to the time it's shipped to the state.
Mhm.
Okay.
And I know you know the system, because you
Great.
taught me.
Mhm.
You were a good student.
See,
I know, because and that is a very important thing to know. When I taught the poll observer classes, that was the number one request, was to know what the process was.
Mhm.
Well,
Well, the process is all public information.
mhm.
All of our meetings are public meetings,
Mhm.
including the election day meetings, which start at 5 o'clock, and you can come and observe and see what
Right.
happens.
Yeah.
Although I have to admit that between 5 o'clock and about 8:30, when the polls close and the folks start bringing material back to the office,
Mhm.
there's not a lot going on. But
but if they
Yes.
want to see something fascinating, they need to come and watch when all the ballots are open, the provisionals. I mean, you want to talk about a workhorse operation.
right.
Yeah.
Well, in 2020, like I said, we had this huge number of ballots, and we were fortunate enough to be able to, under the regulations and the criteria set by the state, have absentee ballot meetings starting in the end of September, when we actually opened ballots and read them into a tabulator machine. There was nothing published. We as board members had no idea what the numbers look like. And we started doing that in September. Our first meeting started at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We finished at 1:30 in the morning.
Mhm.
And fortunately, by election day, we had processed and put into one of our computers all of the results from all the mail-in balloting in 2020. That way, we were able to get that number to the state, excuse me, by 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the evening, along with the numbers from the early voting. So they were already at the state. The state does not release them until the polls are closed.
Right.
But when the polls close at 7:30, the state releases all this information. So Brunswick County comes up with 0 precincts reported, but it has a whole bunch of numbers, which are all the mail-in paper ballots and all the early voting folks. So
Now, if I'm a voter, my first question to you is going to be, in September, you started opening them up and putting them into a tabulator and no one knows the results.
correct.
How do I know that no one knows the results? I would want, and if I'm a skeptic, that's my first question.
The only place that they're available is on what we call a V drive, which is a heavily encrypted thumb drive, if you would, USB stick. In the meeting, we scan those into the system. The system does not tabulate the totals. It just scans them in, holds them in memory on this V drive. That V drive at the end of every meeting, public meeting, is put into a box with a seal on it. That seal number is recorded and put into the minutes of our meeting for that night.
Mhm.
That's taken back and put into a vault at the Board of Elections. It's brought out with the seal still intact, brought back for the next meeting. The seal number is read and compared to the seal number that was put onto it originally.
Mhm.
And then once we validated that the fact that the seal numbers all match, then it's open and that V drive is put back into the computer for the next reading.
Mhm.
Yeah. And we go through that process at every meeting. All the seal numbers, when they're put on, are public information. When the machines are opened back up again for the next meeting, all of those seal numbers are verified before anything is done. And that way we have a track of what has been done, and the fact that it's been secure in the meantime. Nobody's tampered with it. So
Right.
Now, this is fascinating to me. So you said most of the mail-in ballots were counted by election evening. When is North Carolina's deadline for mail-in to come in? Just out of curiosity.
has to be in by 5 o'clock on election
On
day.
election day. So the
And
reason
it has to be cast by
Yeah.
5 o'clock on election
So
day.
how are you so good at it when states like, say, Arizona take weeks to get it done?
Because they don't do it in advance.
They don't send them out in advance because
No,
they
they
don't
send
count
them. They don't
They don't count
tabulate.
it.
They don't
That's what I was
process
trying to
them in
figure, 'cause
advance.
The obvious question that's out there is you guys are obviously very efficient at it, doing a great job with it. And yet you see states, Arizona is one that sticks in my mind, where they're 3, 4, 5 weeks later and they're extending the deadline. And that's what's creating, I think, a lot of the issues as far as people trusting the election.
And we're going to pause on that thought and pay a few bills and
Yes.
pick up in just a
That
few
time.
minutes. Yes, it
Yes.
is. Halfway through the show. Thank you, everybody. We'll be back. All Things Brunswick.
Marine Service Pro and the Tackle Box Seafood, located at 8210 River Road, Southport, is open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, with the Tackle Box open Monday through Saturday, 7 to 6. Marine Service Pro is a full Suzuki and Tohatsu dealership. They deal in pre-owned boats, full service and repair, with certified technicians in all engines, and fiberglass specialists. The Tackle Box offers fresh local seafood, live bait, a tackle shop, and fish packing and shipping. They also offer a full-service U-Haul dealership. Spend time with Leon or Jenny for one-stop shopping at Marine Service Pro and the Tackle Box Seafood. 8210 River Road, Southport.
This show is also sponsored by Dr. Tony Maglione. Dr. Tony is a cardiologist practicing in Wilmington. He accepts Medicare patients, and his office is located across the street from New Hanover Regional Medical Center at 2032 17th Street. The office number is 202-1071. Dr. Tony is an author whose last book is Rules for Conservative Patriots, and it can be purchased on Amazon. His website is www.drtonymag.com.
Veteran Awareness sponsored by You Are Not Alone. Today's veteran homeless rate is approximately 19,750, and the numbers are declining because of the various veteran programs. If you are a veteran you know is homeless, please call 877-4AID-VET. This is a confidential and toll-free call. From this veteran to other veterans, please be there to help our brother and sister veterans. Again, the number is 1-877-424-3838. And thank you for your service.
It seems like every other store is now selling CBD in some form or another. But did you know that Wilmington has just one local CBD company? I'm talking about Carolina Pure. Family owned and operated, they are Wilmington's first and only CBD company that makes quality hemp products right here in town, including tinctures, topicals, and pet products. Their hemp is sourced from local farmers and they support area musicians and nonprofits. Check us out at carolinapureshop.com.
What a great place we all call home. From colorful sunsets to panoramic coastal views. The best attractions are its people, a community of friends and family. J.K. Summers, attorney at law, recognizes this fact and is proud of his work to protect their rights. Put your trust in him to prepare wills and trusts, real estate transactions, contract and LLC creations, and criminal, traffic, and civil matters. Visit oakislandlaw.com or call 910-253-5572. J.K. Summers, attorney at law.
Back to everybody. It's All Things Brunswick Part 2. And we're having a good time here, as you can tell. We have a very serious conversation going on about the Board of Elections and voting and secure voting and what it means, how it means to your vote, how your vote is protected, and the fact that you should vote. But anyway, Randy's been great with this. He's answered every one of our questions. Dan is Dan, and we're still moving on with everything we have to do.
You're bad.
Be jealous that I asked a good question.
Well, I have a question. I think I would like to ask Randy, what do we need to have in place before 2024?
Good question. In my opinion, there are three things that need to be corrected. And once again, I say, this is my opinion, on a going forward basis to secure the voter base for elections. Number one is, and I have to go back to 1993. 1993 was Bill Clinton's first year in election as a president. He had a Democratic Congress and a Democratic Senate. They passed a piece of legislation called the National Voter Rights Act, NVRA, for 1993. Sounds very nice. One of the clauses in that piece of legislation directed the states to simply put on a checkbox on the voter application form that says, I'm a U.S. citizen. And because it was affidavit, theoretically, it was a legal document. And we all know that nobody would ever lie on a legal document. But in 2010 or 11, and I've forgotten the exact date, the state of Arizona challenged that in court and wanted to be able to require proof of citizenship to register to vote. The federal government fought them on it and won. I compare it to getting a passport. You can't get a passport today without proof of U.S. citizenship.
Exactly.
You cannot get a real ID driver's license without proof of citizenship.
Right.
I think we need to be able to say, yes, you can vote as long as you're a U.S. citizen. That's in the Constitution. So I would like, and this is a federal issue, I would like to see some action taken in Congress to correct what I feel is a weakness in the protection of the voting database. Fast forward, as I said earlier, we had 27,000 or so applications for ballots. One of those folks was from somebody here in Brunswick County who mysteriously put on their green card number on the ballot, on the application.
Mhm.
Because they were a registered voter, we had to send them a ballot. But our staff, following the elections, forwarded that to the state. The state has investigators. The state investigator determined that, in fact, this person had voted and was not a U.S. citizen. They referred that, along with 7 felon issues, also to John David's office, district attorney for Brunswick County.
Right.
And he took that information to the grand jury and indicted these 8 folks, including the one folk
Right.
who is not a U.S. citizen.
I remember.
Right. I don't know what the status of all of those cases are. That would have to be Mr. David's office to comment on that. But the point I'm trying to make is the fact that because we have a weakness in the registration process,
Right.
where we cannot require proof of citizenship,
Mhm.
here in Brunswick County, we had at least one individual who was not a U.S. citizen who was registered to vote. That's something that the auditor in me says needs to be fixed.
Right.
Mhm.
Yes.
The second item is voter ID, photo
Yeah.
ID.
There goes my next
That
question.
was,
Photo ID.
mine too. I was ready to go with it.
Quick story. My wife and I were in Cozumel, Mexico about 3 weeks ago. We were on this dock side. We were on a cruise and walking through the area where they have all these vendors. Obviously, all the people buying stuff were off of the ships. All the people selling stuff were from Cozumel. We stopped at one stand and we wanted to buy a refrigerator magnet for $3 for our daughter because she collects them on her refrigerator.
Right.
The lady from Mexico would not sell me a $3 refrigerator magnet for cash without a photo ID.
What?
Wow.
Exactly.
Wow. What's your logic?
Taxes. I don't know what it meant. I never
Interesting.
did understand her. You know, my hearing is not good. Her accent was fairly heavy. I was getting annoyed. I finally
Did they
said,
take a picture of the ID or just look at it?
I did not have it with me. I didn't take it off the
Yeah, you
ship.
normally wouldn't carry it with you.
Right.
Right.
So,
If you had to get back on the ship, you should at least.
You'd
pass
send
it.
your
Wow.
ship ID.
well,
That
you
is
have
crazy.
a little medallion now
Oh, yeah,
to
that's
get on
princess
the
for sure.
ship. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a photo ID with me. So I finally, well, you lose. I walked away.
That's
But
crazy.
I could not buy a $3 refrigerator magnet without a photo ID. But yet, we
Did
can
your
vote.
room number win the prize in the stores?
No.
I won silver earrings.
Wow. And
Uh,
they look
They
very
look
good
lovely
on
on me,
you. Yeah.
don't they?
I do have
They
a question
do.
along those lines, though. Do you need to have an ID to register to vote?
no.
You have to have proof of residency in location,
Yeah.
utility bill or something. And the reason for that is so that you can be assigned to a proper precinct. The state of North Carolina requires us to develop statistics based upon precincts and what your precinct is.
Mhm.
So in an election year, we may have a ballot that looks exactly the same for every precinct in Brunswick County. but in fact, they're keyed to the specific precinct where you are registered so that we can deliver statistics, easy for me to say,
Right.
back to the state. And in some elections, and this happens a lot in municipal elections, we wind up with 30 or 40 different ballots, even though they may look exactly the same. So it's a massive issue.
It
the
is.
process,
Yeah,
rather.
so you don't need a driver's
Right.
license to register. All you need to do is produce a
Proof
Duke
of
Energy
residency.
bill.
Correct.
That's it. So
Oh,
there's another potential.
Yeah. Well, let me
Yeah,
tell you,
issue there.
Well,
Vince and I do outreach, and we register voters. Okay. And we could be at the Belleville Founders Day,
Mhm.
and people line up to register to vote. They are not required to show us a darn thing. They sit down at the table, they fill out the necessary paperwork. We take that, turn it into the Board of Elections, and they're registered.
Well, I think and I am not totally familiar with the process. I believe the staff would actually get the necessary documentation from them after you turn that paperwork in. There's additional work that the staff does to be able to get them into the proper precinct, and so,
Really?
and I will tell you, I'm not intimately familiar with that process, so I can inquire.
Because I have always wondered about that.
Okay.
I've found myself asking an individual, "Are you a U.S. citizen?"
Right.
And of course, them stating to me, "Yes, I am,"
Okay.
but I'm not required to have them show me proof.
No.
Not proof of citizenship.
No. So
And-
they sit there,
see,
fill that out, and that's it.
Because you are not an employee of the Board of Elections.
Right.
You can ask that question as an employee of the Board of Elections, our staff, or the members of the board. We can't ask that question. If they check box yes, we have to take them at their word.
Wow.
And that was the federal
Yeah.
government back 12 years ago.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, isn't
It
it? It's
is.
at that level because
It really is. And I had
you could
not
take a
thought
Duke
about
Energy
that
bill,
for a
scan it
while.
in your computer, change a name. I can go register now. It's not
Right.
that hard.
Yeah.
Well, one of the issues, and I will be perfectly honest with you, I have not researched this. I can't tell you for a fact that it exists here in Brunswick County. But when we lived in Florida, one of the major issues the state of Florida had were folks who owned property in Florida, a condo or whatever, but were actually residents of some other state and came and vacation there in the fall.
Yep.
They would register to vote in Florida and still be registered to vote in New Jersey or New York or Connecticut or wherever else. And in the state of Florida, that's a big issue. And it's
an
hard to
issue
control.
here too, because at one point I had a house here and a house in New York. I could have registered in either one.
Right.
I stayed in New York at the time and voted there. I would never.
Sorry.
Well, I was getting out as fast as I could, but I was getting mail going, "Hey, you want to register?" And I would be like, "I'm still a New York resident. No, that would be illegal," and all that stuff.
Well, I own a home in Maine and I live here. And what I was told is I needed, because I own property here and property there, I was told that I needed to choose where I wanted my primary residence to be. So I chose here.
Okay.
So I'm registered to vote here. So I cannot vote anymore in Maine. I haven't for years.
Right.
But I could, because I could discontinue this here and register there. So
yeah, what
that's-
check and balance is there on, forget national election, local elections, for example?
yeah,
How would you know if I was potentially registered in both New York and North Carolina? Do the states talk that way?
Here again, that's one of there is a mechanism to do that. I am not intimately familiar with it.
Okay.
But as I used to tell my folks when I worked, I don't know, but I will find out and get
I'd
back.
be curious to know that. I mean, nationally, I got to believe there's something, but
yeah.
I mean, if you're voting for mayor or councilman or whatever.
I think
I wonder if there's any
they
check.
pick up on it, Now, this Board of Elections is so on top of things that they asked me, to choose my primary residence.
Right.
I remember I had to do the same.
Yeah, and I
So,
was
yeah.
not asked in Maine.
You know, it
There were only 12 people in the state, and they weren't in that part of the area.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah, but the moose.
They were
vote,
fixing
too.
the windmill at the time,
Yeah.
so they couldn't be at both places.
They
at
count the
once.
moose as population, so, or the Mises.
You know what's also interesting with voting, and you want to talk about changing things around. Our jury department, if you will, or judicial department, is not allowed to tell the Board of Elections if someone fills out a form that says, "I'm not a citizen" or "I don't live in
Right.
this county."
Yep.
They're not allowed to send that over
Isn't
there
that
by law,
strange?
State law.
state law.
State law. Okay.
I think that's
That-
strange too, Bill.
that is
That's-
one of the issues that I actually personally spoke to Jim McCallum about and got the same answer. I've spoken to Katie Madden about, I had the same answer. They are restricted.
And I know
Yet-
why it happened.
You know why?
Yeah, my wife's husband did it.
that would be him.
And that's a true story. In 2010 and 2011, I was chairing the rhino that some people call me. I was running the Tea Party up in Edenton, and I was working with the Republican chair there. And we went down to the Board of Elections and the jury department, and we said, "Look, we're trying to purify our records." Now, keep in mind, Chowan County is a total of 14,000 total people, so you're not talking about a big county. And the lady there running it was great. She gave us a copy of everybody's refusal letter, whatever it was, and we were able to go through them and say, I don't live in the county, I'm not a resident, whatever. And we were able to then take them back to them and say, to the Board of Elections, and say, look, all these people have written a government letter that said they can't vote, and they were fixed. And about a year later, that law was passed that didn't allow that to happen anymore.
Wow.
So
Who
I
was in charge at the time?
was that McCourt?
I'm just curious why they
It
would.
was
put that
2011
through.
and 2012.
No,
But it was a state. It was a state. The Republicans had just taken over the county.
Right.
The
It
state.
was Bev.
It was Bev.
Yeah.
But
Bevy.
it was probably a rule initially coming out of the Board of Elections because it was 3-2 again with Democrat at that
There
point.
you go.
But I know exactly where it came from, and I know why it happened because we found
So it's your fault.
in a 14,000 person county, we found 156 people who had put down they couldn't vote because they were not a member of the county for some reason. Now, being the high school principal at the time, I knew that probably 80 of those kids had put that down because they were in college away from the county and they couldn't serve on jury duty. So we eliminated those people, but we still ended up with over 70 people that said, I'm on your rolls, but I can't, but I don't live here.
Huh.
And if you take those numbers and apply it from 14,000 to 140,000,
Extrapolate it out.
you got
yeah.
some numbers to play with.
Yes.
So,
Wow.
And the other thing they need to be looking at, and you got me on a roll now,
oh, go with it.
is, they do get a report from if someone dies within county,
Mhm.
they will be told at the Board of Elections that so-and-so died within the county. But where it falls apart is if you die outside the county. If you're going to Raleigh for
Exactly.
treatment, if you're in the southern part of the county, you're most likely going to Myrtle Beach down there because you're not hauling up here. And those are not recorded.
Nope.
They are not sent to the Board of Elections. What we've been doing for years, and we had a young woman doing that, not so young anymore, but Carla just passed, and she did nothing but go through all the newspapers from north and south looking for people who died outside of county, and we had a procedure to get it through to try and get it fixed. So, but that's another hole in the system that needs to be dealt
Yes.
with.
Yes.
Sorry, Randy, but I'm on
Yeah.
a roll.
And just to clarify, that's something that we struggle with at a county
Mhm.
level. And unfortunately, we don't have the ability at the county level from the Board of Elections to correct that. That has to be done at the state level.
State level,
Agreed.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And there, the state does send us a lot of data and a lot of folks who have died maybe in another county, but it's delayed. But that whole process could be improved upon.
Mhm.
And
Especially in the day of computers.
I was gonna say they're all entered into
Mhm.
a computer at some point. The computers talk.
Yeah.
It's not that hard.
Now,
Now,
there's an old line, garbage in, garbage out.
Right. So this award, I just want to clarify this. Was it something that could be accepted or not accepted? Thank you.
um,
Okay.
I honestly can't answer that question. But I just like to say a couple of things. First of all, in the elections business, there's two sides to the business.
Right.
There's the balloting side, which is controlled by the state, as I said. What our folks are doing, they're talking about the administrative issues
Right.
with these other jurisdictions, and that can only help. So I'm not
So
sure
this
where I
is
was going with
something that would have been,
This is something that I think, wait a minute. They had an option whether to accept to participate or not.
right. Well, that's
But
what
they
I was
chose to
asking.
Participate from the administrative end and not the
Right.
voting end. And they
Okay.
limited what they were doing.
Okay.
That's what he's trying to
like
clarify.
I said,
Okay.
as I think I said earlier, one of the items is these folks are going to be giving out grants, and Brunswick County would qualify for $1.5 million up to. We are not going to accept any of that money. There's a lot of folks describe that as dark money.
Yes.
We are not doing that. In 2020, there were a number of programs run by the federal government or the state that provided funds for the elections in 2020. Obviously we can take those and alleviate the impact to the taxpayers of Brunswick County. But, going forward, decision that we're not going to accept any non-governmental money.
Even though it would have been beneficial to,
Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Sometimes it's not worth the hassle.
I know. Exactly. Good way to put it, Bill.
Okay.
So-
It's
Mm,
time now to basically wrap it up again, guys. We have to pay
yeah.
a few
Oh
more
my
bills.
gosh.
And then we have to close down, and then we have to say thank you for being here and keeping us informed. And we'll explain to Dan what happened later. And anyway, time to pay a few bills.
all
Thank
the
you.
time. All the time.
This show is also sponsored by Dr. Tony Maglione. Dr. Tony is a cardiologist practicing in Wilmington. He accepts Medicare patients, and his office is located across the street from New Hanover Regional Medical Center at 2032 17th Street. The office number is 202-1071. Dr. Tony is an author whose last book is Rules for Conservative Patriots, and it can be purchased on Amazon. His website is www.drtonymag.com.
What a great place we all call home. From colorful sunsets to panoramic coastal views. The best attractions are its people, a community of friends and family. J.K. Summers, attorney at law, recognizes this fact and is proud of his work to protect their rights. Put your trust in him to prepare wills and trusts, real estate transactions, contract and LLC creations, and criminal, traffic, and civil matters. Visit oakislandlaw.com or call 910-253-5572. J.K. Summers, attorney at law.
Veteran Awareness sponsored by You Are Not Alone. Today's veteran homeless rate is approximately 19,750, and the numbers are declining because of the various veteran programs. If you are a veteran you know is homeless, please call 877-4AID-VET. This is a confidential and toll-free call. From this veteran to other veterans, please be there to help our brother and sister veterans. Again, the number is 1-877-424-3838. And thank you for your service.
Marine Service Pro and the Tackle Box Seafood, located at 8210 River Road, Southport, is open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, with the Tackle Box open Monday through Saturday, 7 to 6. Marine Service Pro is a full Suzuki and Tohatsu dealership. They deal in pre-owned boats, full service and repair, with certified technicians in all engines, and fiberglass specialists. The Tackle Box offers fresh local seafood, live bait, a tackle shop, and fish packing and shipping. They also offer a full-service U-Haul dealership. Spend time with Leon or Jenny for one-stop shopping at Marine Service Pro and the Tackle Box Seafood, 8210 River Road, Southport.
It seems like every other store is now selling CBD in some form or another. But did you know that Wilmington has just one local CBD company? I'm talking about Carolina Pure. Family owned and operated, they are Wilmington's first and only CBD company that makes quality hemp products right here in town, including tinctures, topicals, and pet products. Their hemp is sourced from local farmers and they support area musicians and nonprofits. Check us out at carolinapureshop.com.
Again, baby.
Maybe. Are you
And we
sure?
want to tell you that All Things Brunswick is actually wrapping up another great show. We've had a great time. Randy's been a great guest with us. We've learned an awful lot. Hopefully you have
Absolutely.
also, and hopefully you've turned in for another reason to listen to us often and, get out there and turn into YouTube and watch us and, watch Mary have to put up with the two of us.
Yes.
The thorn between two roses, or is that the rose between two
Oh,
thorns?
oh my goodness, he changed
He
it.
said it. He said it.
Before we go, I want to thank TK and Greta for all your hard work. Thanks, guys. We couldn't do it without you. And I guess Dan and Bill, they make my life
A living hell. Go ahead.
interesting. I'll just say interesting.
And that's their good points.
Yeah, yeah.
And thank Randy Pelton so much for joining us today.
We're
Well,
glad
thank
you
you for
came in.
coming. That
Thank
was
you.
really
And don't be a
Yes.
stranger. If there's something else you want to tell us or get on the air with,
Yep,
just let Mary know and we'll clear the decks for you to be.
absolutely.
Thank you for having me. And, if any of your listeners, I guess, have any questions, they can get in touch with you folks.
Yeah, and we'll pass
Sure.
them on to you and give
Yeah.
it back that way.
Appreciate
That
it.
would be fine.
Yes, thank you.
if, can I give,
Take your plugs.
okay. Brunswick County Board of Elections website, www.brunswickcountync, that's all one word, .gov/elections. A treasure trove of information
Mhm.
about elections. You can check your own registration out there.
Mhm.
Please do it. One of the things that's out there is a list and agenda for all of our meetings. All of our meetings are
Right.
public. We've had some we've held in the evenings. I disappointed the fact that we generally have no more than 6 people who ever show up. And so they are also online. So if you'd like to find out when our next meeting is, check the dates, check the agendas, and come out and watch us work.
And I will
Thank
point out that
you.
the Brunswick County Republican Party puts out an important date list every month in the beginning of the month.
Right.
And the Board of Elections meeting is listed on that date list. So you can go to that list and take a look at that also. So I
Yep.
think at that point, guys, unless you
No,
got something else to talk about,
we're good.
I'm good.
oh, I think this is Bill Moore, and
And Mary Stillwell.
Sure, that's your name. Dan Roman.
I'm not even going to go there.
Thank
Thanking you for listening, and we'll see you in a week.
Thank you for tuning in.